Good evening. On June 26, 5 people committed a grave sin when they had the audacity to think that the created being could shake their fist in the face of the Creator and tell the Creator that you got it wrong. That we think that we are progressive enough in our understanding and enlightened enough now that we can say that what you designed as male and female, man and woman, husbands and wives, as marriage, where the two unite and become one flesh, we have a better idea that, in fact, no two men of the same gender, two women of the same gender, they can do the same thing, and we can have the same happy, go after, fairy tale, white picket fence lifestyle. And that it's not going to make any difference. And in fact, all of you throughout the millennia of human history who still believe that marriage should be objectively, observably between a male and a female, a man and a woman, that you all are bigots. How dare they say that? Now, I'm someone who argues before the United States Supreme Court. I've written briefs before the United States Supreme Court. I argue all over the country in state and federal courts and at all different levels. But I'm here to say to you that we need to stop playing charades. We need to stop the fictitious charade game, thinking that 5 individuals can rewrite God's natural created order of marriage as the union of a man and a woman, and 320 million Americans are just simply going to follow them like the Pied Piper off the cliff into the very pit of hell. If that's what they think, they have something else coming. Because as for me and my household, I will not obey those 5. I will obey God rather than man. And they have shaken their fist in the face of the Creator. And we must resist that. If you can imagine that 5 individuals not only violated natural law, obviously, and revealed law, no question about it, but they violated their very oath, the Constitution. The same 5 individuals 2 years ago in June, the same 5 said that states have the right to define marriage. 2 years later, in 2015, they said the states don't have the right to define marriage, that it's a constitutional right, and marriages between 2 men and 2 women must be recognized by the states, and the states have no choice. Now, first of all, I don't agree that states have the right to define marriage any more than 5 lawyers on the Supreme Court have the right to define marriage. Marriage is not a states' rights issue. The edges of marriage, how you get in it, how you get out of it, the benefits associated with it, that's a states' rights issue. But the essence of marriage is defined by God in creation, the union of a man and a woman. A state nor 5 lawyers have the right to redefine what's part of the natural created order any more than a state or 5 lawyers have the right to redefine the law of gravity. It is what it is. Now, you may not like the law of gravity. You might like to fly or jump off of a building and not get hurt. That may be your opinion. You're entitled to that. This is America. But you can't change the law of gravity, and you certainly can't, by an opinion of 5 people, impose it on 320 million Americans and make us think that the law of gravity is no longer the law of gravity. It is as ridiculous to change the law of gravity as it is to think that you have the ability to change the natural created order of marriage as the union of a man and a woman. Now, what they have done is they have unleashed a cataclysm of consequences. Now, Chief Justice John Roberts, whatever you think of him, one of the things that you have to understand about him is he is a person who likes collegiality. He likes to be able to have collegiality among the other justices on the bench. So when the Chief Justice says this, it's unprecedented and it's meant for you to take notice. Because not only is it unusual for this Chief Justice to speak in the way he did in the dissent, but we haven't found any place in history of the Supreme Court where the Chief Justice in a dissent refers to the people in the majority as 5 lawyers as opposed to justices or members of the bench. And 3 times Chief Justice John Roberts said that these were 5 lawyers. He said this: 5 lawyers imposed their will, not a legal judgment, not based on the Constitution, and not based on the court's precedents. So let me just give you a little mathematical formula. 5 lawyers plus imposing their will, plus not a legal judgment, plus not based on the Constitution, plus not based on the court's precedent equals what? It equals tyranny. It equals a lawless decision. It is their opinion, and they're entitled to that opinion. That's fine, but it is not the rule of law. If they've sworn to take an oath to interpret the Constitution, we ought to better expect that they interpret the Constitution. And when they just impose their opinion, let alone changing their mind from 2013 saying the states can, and in 2015 the states can't, and simply ignoring the Constitution, ignoring the court's precedent, ignoring, as they understood they were doing, millennia of human history, then how can we take them seriously? Now, Chief Justice John Roberts and the other justices, as they dissented, said that people of faith, you're not going to find any comfort or any solace from this 5-lawyer opinion. And by the way, it's not an order. A rule of law has something that has order. It's not a decision. It's an opinion. It's an opinion of 5 lawyers. We need to think it that way because that's exactly what it is. Whenever they go off the beaten path of the Constitution, and not only that, collide with natural law. You can't get any more objective than male and female. Marriage was not created by some constitutional referendum. It wasn't created by some state or federal legislature. It's not created by some Supreme Court. Male and female is part of the natural created order. Through millennia of human history, from the Han Chinese to all of the different civilizations throughout all of our existence, we've always understood what's obvious, and that is a man and a woman are complementary sexes made for one another. And when they come together, they also make another human being like them, and it procreates the new generation. And it's in that environment that children are raised and become productive citizens of society. That's why we protected it through millennia of human history. We didn't have to be told about it. We didn't have to have a referendum. We didn't have to put it on the state ballot. It's what it is. We don't create it by a constitutional referendum. We affirm what already exists, is already in existence. For them to deny what predates all civil government, what predates organized religion, what is part of the natural created order is so far afield that we cannot obey it. Now, in the history of the Supreme Court, in 1992, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, in the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision, the abortion decision, she said, well, the reason why they had to uphold the abortion decision of 1973 is because it would be such a major shift from what they did in 73 to now say it's not in the Constitution, that the people would lose confidence in the court and we would lose our authority. She said the only power that the Supreme Court has is the confidence of the people. We don't have the power to create law like the legislature, and we can't even enforce our own decisions because that's the executive. We can write opinions, but we don't have any enforcement power. The only power we have is if you all think that they're doing their job and you maintain confidence. And if we lose confidence, she said, in the court, then the court loses its authority. So we have to continue on with abortion so we can preserve our own authority so that we don't look like we've made some terrible mistake. Well, she was right. The only authority that the Supreme Court has, or any court, is the confidence of the people. It has no enforcement mechanism, and it can't create new law. Now, there's been times in our history, Dred Scott, where the racist Chief Justice Taney, who collided with Abraham Lincoln over the issue of slavery, wrote a decision when Dred Scott wanted to have justice before the court. He goes there and Taney writes the decision and said, no justice here at this high court for you, Dred, because we believe that, quote, blacks are inferior human beings, close quote. Well, God created people of different color in his own image. No one created in the image of God is inferior to another human being created in the image of God. That decision was contrary to the Constitution, it's contrary to natural law, and it's contrary to revealed law. No one today would defend that decision, but why did we pretend that it was the rule of law then? We did pretend. And we also fought a civil war to undo that racist, bigoted, unconstitutional decision that was contrary to natural law and contrary to revealed law. Now, in 1927, the famous Oliver Wendell Holmes had a case called Buck versus Bell. Carrie Buck was in Virginia. It was part of the eugenics, Planned Parenthood movement kind of idea of creating a super race, and Virginia was ground zero for a brand new test case. They passed a law that allowed the state of Virginia to forcibly sterilize the undesirables, and so that they could not procreate more undesirables. So Carrie Buck had 3 previous generations of low IQ in her family, although she herself did not have low IQ, but they didn't want to have people with low IQ continue to be propagating. So the Commonwealth of Virginia took her into a facility, forcibly sterilized her. She sought justice before the high court table. And when she got the decision from Oliver Wendell Holmes, he wrote the infamous decision in Buck versus Bell and said, no justice for you here, Carrie, because, quote, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, close quote. How dare he insult someone who's created in the image of God just because someone in her family doesn't have the same IQ as him. And that decision was upheld. And that law spread throughout the United States. And it caught the attention of a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. And he used Buck versus Bell and the law in Virginia as the very foundation of his eugenics movement in Germany. And then when the Nazis were put on trial in Nuremberg for crimes against humanity, for war crimes, guess what they did? They cited and they quoted Buck versus Bell. Why are you having an issue with us? You Americans did the same exact thing. Now, no one today would defend that decision. But if no one defends it as the rule of law today, it wasn't the rule of law the moment it was penned. It was a bigoted, wrong decision. Why did we pretend that it was the right rule of law? Now, in the Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote the letter from Birmingham jail, and people asked him, Martin, why are you obeying some laws and other laws you don't obey? And he says, well, that's simple. And he hearkens through years and hundreds of years and thousands of years of Judeo-Christian history. He says, because there are 2 different kinds of laws. There's a just law and an unjust law. The difference between the two is that a just law is an earthly law that's in conformity to a higher law. You've got to obey that. An unjust law is an earthly law that is in direct collision and conflict with higher law. Now, there's a lot of laws we don't like. We may think they're unjust, but they don't collide with higher law. But there are a few laws that are in direct collision with higher law. The issue of the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception for every human being born is part of the natural law. It is part of something that is not only natural, but a created law, revealed law, I should say. And things that collide with that are unjust laws. Now, what I'm saying about this issue of marriage, we should have done in 1973. We should have done this in 1973. And it's not too late to do it now. Let me pause and give a footnote. In 1973, 7 people said, you individuals, states, you have to allow human genocide within your borders, in your community, and you can't do anything about it because the Constitution, as we interpret it, says so. Really? Is that what you're saying? That we have to allow the destruction of innocent human beings because 7 people told us so? And then in 1992, 5 people told us so. And guess who wrote who was the swing vote in that decision? It was Kennedy, who was the same swing vote in June of this year, and who wrote the decision. In fact, in that particular decision in 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, After the oral argument, when they took the original vote, it was 5-4 to overturn Roe versus Wade. And Rehnquist was writing the opinion to overturn it for 30 days. He was writing that opinion. O'Connor and Souter lobbied Kennedy. You've got to change your vote. You got to change your vote. And after 30 days of lobbying him, he switched his vote. He went and talked to Blackmun, who was still on the court, who was the author of the 73 decision. And he said to Blackmun, I'm switching my vote. For the next 30 days, the opinion went the other way, and Kennedy was now in the other side. And the decision was taken from Rehnquist and given over to the others, who were the dissenters that now became the majority, and Roe versus Wade, the abortion decision, was upheld. Kennedy has a lot of blood on his hands for doing that. Now, we should have said in 73, and we should have reiterated it in 92, neither 7 nor 5 people can force us as individuals, as communities, as cities, as counties, as states to allow human genocide within our area of jurisdiction. And we should do it now. But the difference here between the abortion decision and the marriage decision is one of coerciveness. We were able to go on from 73 until Obamacare without thinking about abortion. Yes, we have decried it. Yes, we've had murder taking place in our community, but we weren't forced to participate in it. But the issue of marriage and the attempted redefinition of it has a coercive effect. You will not be able to run. You will not be able to hide. You'll not be able to escape this discussion, as unpleasant as it is. You will have to make a decision, and there's only 2 choices. 1, will you obey God and come in conflict with the civil authorities? Or 2, will you simply go along to get along and compromise your values and your commitment to God Almighty? Those are the only 2 choices. Churches, it's coming to you. Pastors, it's coming to you. Tax exemption, property tax exemption, use of your facilities, whether you can or can't perform a wedding or what kinds of weddings you can perform. Nonprofit organizations, like, for example, Bob Jones University, when it had an interracial dating policy, it ultimately lost its tax-exempt status because of that. Universities and nonprofits are going to have their tax-exempt status challenged when you elevate sexual behavior, same-sex activities, to the same protected category as race. The issue of accreditation. There's a school in Canada, a law school, that just lost its accreditation because it has a policy that sexual activity must be between a man and a woman in marriage. And as a result of that, they can graduate their students with law degrees, but they can't take the bar now anywhere in their own nation of Canada. That just happened within the last 12 months. Student loans are going to be affected. So when your students go out to apply for a loan and they want to go to a Christian college, the policy will be, I mark my word, under this administration, the policy will be that you can only use a student loan to go to a college that has a pro-LGBT policy. Bakers, adoption facilities, wedding photographers, all professions, attorneys, myself, doctors, counselors. Counselors are already in this quagmire of not being able to counsel in some states individuals who have same-sex attractions and give them the hope that they can change through the power of Jesus Christ. Because in California and New Jersey and also Washington, D.C., to do that kind of counseling now, when the client wants that kind of counseling, it's considered unethical behavior and you will lose your counseling license. You can't run from this because this is a clash of worldviews. This is a cataclysmic decision. It has consequences for our children. As a policy matter, what this decision or what this idea says is not that we're just going to allow 2 people to live together and live happily ever after. No, the policy decision says that as a community, for the common good, we now have this law, and the law is we're going to encourage people to aspire to this relationship because we're putting it on a platform. We're going to put all the recognition around it and encourage people to aspire to that relationship. And what does that relationship say to children? Boys, you don't need father. He's absolutely irrelevant to your well-being. And girls, you don't need mom or dad, because two of the same gender are just as good as mom and dad. And we know from just common sense, let alone from sociological studies, and now also reports from children who were raised by two lesbians or two homosexual men, that it harms children. When you take mother and father out of that child's life, it has a significant impact on that child. Same-sex marriage or parenting is different than single-sex parenting. Why? Because single-sex parenting, number one, has the possibility of introducing the opposite sex into that relationship for that young boy or young girl. Number two, that single-sex parent, whether woman or man, still has an affinity towards the opposite sex, not a negative view of them. But same-sex not only permanently eliminates mom or dad from that young child's life, but also gives a negative view of the absent gender. Two women not only eliminate father, but give a negative view to the son or daughter of father, and vice versa. And the conflict with religious liberty we've already talked about. We must stand up. We must stop playing charades. 5 individuals on June 26 committed a grave sin by thinking that they could look at the Creator and they could jettison millennia of human history. They could ignore natural law, revealed law. They could contradict themselves from 2 years before. They could not have any shred of constitutional authority. They could ignore anything that the court has ever written in its history. And they could pontificate, just because they could do it, that marriage is now between a man and a woman, and it's a constitutional right, and you must obey it. And you who disagree are bigots. That's a grave sin. There will be judgment on those 5 unless they repent. You cannot shake your fist in the face of the Creator without consequences of His creation. Imagine this just for a moment. On a microcosm, Michelangelo develops this beautiful art of painting, a special skill. So when you see Michelangelo painting, you see Michelangelo in it. That's a Michelangelo painting. His whole life he's been preparing for this momentous painting, and he spends months and months and months painting the Sistine Chapel. And it echoes through history because it has order and meaning and beauty. And people throughout the ages come and they adore it. And they think of Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel. And somebody then comes in 2015, and they look at it, and they bring in a paint bucket, and they say, Michael, this is ugly. You got it all wrong. I'm going to redo this, and start slopping paint all over the place. Imagine if Michael was able to watch this happen, or if we were able to watch something like that be desecrated, how it would be. God created male and female at the highest created order of His creation. It is the crown jewel of His creation. Because of all the things that He created it in His image. Nothing else is created in His image. He created it uniquely, that has 3 components that no other relationship has. It has a unitive component. No relationship except for a man and woman in marriage, where it says the 2 will become one flesh, has that. It's not mom and the daughter, father and the son, your sibling or your best friend. It's only in that relationship that is unique where the 2 become one, a unitive component no other relationship has. Secondly, it has a procreative component that no other relationship has, where those 2 come together as one, and they are able to procreate another human being in the highest created order of the image of God. That God has blessed us with that amazing opportunity to come together in one and create from that union another human being at the highest creation. And the third thing it has is a spiritual dimension. Ephesians 5 speaks about husbands loving your wives and wives your husbands. But then it says, I'm speaking of a mystery, because what I'm really speaking about, what marriage is about, is about Christ's relationship with his church. He incarnated himself into humanity and became one with us, like the two become one flesh. And he loved us and gave himself for us, and so we should do the same for our spouses. And he says that relationship teaches us something spiritual about Christ in his relationship with his church. So when you destroy that, you destroy this great, amazing creation that God designed. And when 5 people think that they can do that without consequences, they've got something else coming. Now, they committed a grave sin on June 26. But we, the people, are the government, not 5 lawyers. And we have a choice. We have a choice to reject that sin outright and to obey God rather than man. Or we have a choice to accept it actively or pathetically or just simply without resistance. And the sin of those 5 will become the sin of every person who accepts it. If we are silent, we will accept the sin that they have ultimately committed. We must stand up. If we will not stand up and resist now, we never will. Now let me conclude with this. You can't get any worse than at the time of Esther. Esther's living in the Persian kingdom, now modern-day Iran. They have a policy that whatever the king does, he writes, he puts a signet on, it's the law. You can't repeal it. The king can't wake up the next day and say, that was a stupid thing I did yesterday, I'm going to change my mind. He can't do it. Once it's in law, it's law. You can't have a referendum, you can't have a legislative vote, nothing can change it. And so the king writes a law, puts a signet ring on it, and now it's the law, and that is, on March the 7th, all of you Jews, you're not going to lose your license. You're not going to be called bigots. You're not going to be persecuted. You're all going to be killed. All of you. If you're all Jews here, March 7th, this is your last day on earth. Your moms, your dads, your children, your grandparents, everyone's dead. And you can't change it. And yet Esther and Mordecai, they saw that. Esther said, you know, if I go into the king, I'm going to be possibly killed. And Mordecai says, if you don't do it, you'll die anyway. And your family. And God will raise up somebody else. On second thought, she said, maybe I ought to go in and do it. Let's pray for 3 days. You all pray, we'll pray. 3 days later, she goes in and she disobeys the law of the land. She does civil disobedience. She goes into the presence of the king when she's not supposed to. Just like Daniel did civil disobedience when he prayed when he wasn't supposed to. And the 3 Hebrews did civil disobedience when they didn't bow when they were supposed to. And Moses' parents did civil disobedience in Hebrews 11. It says they were not afraid of the king's edict because they were supposed to give over their son, but they didn't do it. They were obeying God rather than man. They engaged in civil disobedience and God ultimately intervened. Now, if God can change that situation around, and instead of the annihilation of the Jewish people, that today the Jewish people celebrate the Feast of Purim, if God can do that at the time of Esther, then this could be the greatest time in the history of the church, especially in our lifetime. This is our time. This is our generation. We must stand up. We cannot be silent. We must obey God rather than man. As for me and my household, I can tell you that we will serve the Lord. May God bless you. May God forgive the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you.